Hello and welcome to Queer Issues and Back Issues.
I'm Ben,
And I'm Ryan.
and today we're going to talk about one of our favorite superheroes, Wonder Woman.
We just saw the movie yesterday and we're super excited to talk about the world's finest superheroine in print and on screen.
As always, we're going to put emphasis on LGBTQ issues, but we're also all about intersectionality. So we're also going to talk about her status as a feminist icon and talk about intersectionality.
We have so much to say about Diana Prince, so we're going to get right into it and start into her comic book origin story.
So, Wonder Woman was invented in 1941 by William Marsden, who is also the creator of the polygraph, otherwise known as the lie detector. He was a polyamorous man who had a wife named Elizabeth and a lover named Olive. He wanted a superhero who fought with love instead of violence, and his wife Elizabeth convinced him to make the character a woman. He was also very upset that girls at that time didn't want to grow up to be women because of the negative stereotypes that surround women then and to this day. They were seen as weak and submissive, and he wanted to have a character that was, quote, had the strength of Superman plus all the allure of a good and beautiful woman.
At the time, this was a pretty radical statement, considering it was the 1940s. Obviously, we wouldn't consider necessarily that to be so much as feminist as
kind of sexist.
chivalrous, you know?
Yeah.
But, William, Elizabeth, and Olive were all pro suffrage, and using the standards of the times would be considered feminist. Wonder Woman was actually based on lots of pro-woman suffragists and activists, most notably Margaret Sanger, who is the founder of Planned Parenthood and a prominent birth control activist. Now, Golden Age Wonder Woman's actual origin story was that she was made out of clay by Hippolyta, the queen of the Amazons, and brought to life by Aphrodite, the goddess of loves.
Which means two moms very, very early on in the inception of the character.
You
which is
know,
cool.
abstractly, but still.
Yeah.
So she started as an Amazonian on Paradise Island, which was later renamed Themyscira, which was an island given to the Amazonians by the Greek gods and hidden by magic to humans. She found Steve Trevor, a World War II U.S. intelligence officer who washed up near the island after a plane crash. Diana immediately falls in love with him, and he tells her about Man's World. And after winning a contest to become the ambassador to Man's World and teach them peace, Diana returns with Steve Trevor to Man's World and helps them fight the Nazis, as you do.
As everyone should. So she later, outside of the Wonder Woman comics and Sensation comics, is written into the Justice Society of America, which is the sort of precursor to the Justice League. The writers decided to make Wonder Woman the Justice Society's secretary, which Marston was purportedly furious about because it went against the entirety of what the character meant.
Now, in the Silver Age, they did retcon out her secretary-dom.
I think it's like a thing that happened on Earth 2, maybe,
Yeah.
and Silver Age is Earth 1.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the Silver Age, regardless, they revamped her origin story entirely, but most importantly, stripped her of her powers and had her fight crime with more of a Batman-like detective work style, using intuition and mixed martial arts.
This was the point in time where she had a white jumpsuit and she had given up her powers of her own choice to save lives, basically.
Now, in the Bronze Age, Wonder Woman's timeline shifted back and forth from the classic World War II era to the contemporary 1970s, and that was entirely because Lynda Carter's Wonder Woman TV show was really popular, and the comic books are trying to keep up with that. In 1989, the Wonder Woman comic was canceled and ended the run with Wonder Woman's marriage to Steve Trevor, which was immediately retconned out in Crisis on Infinite Earths.
And the Wonder Woman comic was started again with writer George Perez helming it and really apparently being one of the first writers to really want to work on Wonder Woman. Apparently, at the time, a lot of writers saw working on Wonder Woman as kind of a chore because no one knew what to do with her at the time. So we have that origin in 1989 with George Perez for a while, going through some changes with events like Infinite Crisis. And then after Flashpoint in 2011, we get the New 52, and her origin story was retconned so that she is a demigoddess, the daughter of Zeus and Hippolyta. This is something I personally I have a lot of problems with because previously her story was very much entrenched in womanhood giving power, which is something that was not done with a lot of other characters. And the New 52 made it so that her powers and her strength come primarily from having a man in her life, which is the opposite of the point. Then, after the New 52 ended, we had Rebirth, written by Greg Rucka. And that's where it gets queer, because Greg Rucka has stated, both in comic and in interviews, that if Wonder Woman would have asexuality, it would be bisexual. She doesn't really have a sexuality because she grew up on an island that is entirely one gender, so you can't really have a sexuality like that, except maybe asexual. And now with Rebirth, you have stories that are being told as her origin story every other issue, and with the modern day every other issue. So they're telling Wonder Woman's origin and what's happening with her life right now from a monthly basis. So now we're going to get into the movie. To start off, we both thought it was good. We recommend it. But if you don't like spoilers, make sure you stop here until you do see it, and then you can come back and hear us share our thoughts, and you can share your thoughts about it in the comments. Okay, so we're gonna give you a couple seconds to leave if you need to.
Oh my God.
Okay, so the movie was awesome.
It made us laugh. It made us cry. I was bawling, honestly, like as soon as the opening, like Justice League, like the new DC opening for their live action movies came on. I was already kind of in tears. But I'm also a huge crybaby, so I don't know if I'm a good reference for that. But I definitely cried at several individual parts during the movie as well.
Diana Prince was fantastic, even though throughout the entire thing you never actually hear her being called Wonder Woman.
Yeah, and also he like really missed something.
It might have been on like maybe a newspaper.
Yeah, or something. Like we were trying to remember if she ever actually got called Wonder Woman, but I don't think so. I don't think she ever got called Wonder Woman.
Even when the movie is technically set in present day and she's having a flashback.
Yeah, the entire movie is a flashback because in the very beginning it's Diana Prince at her day job receives a package from Bruce Wayne, the same package that was sent in the end of BVS, that has a picture of the photograph, the original photograph of Diana Prince, Steve Trevor, and three other men who we are introduced to later in the movie.
Also, apparently, Zack Snyder.
Oh,
did you notice that?
No.
I think it's that photo. Zack Snyder is just right over in the background, just in a little corner, wearing like time accurate clothing. So yeah, 6 people.
All right. But it's the original, copy, and then Wonder Woman sees it, smiles, and goes into a flashback of her childhood at Themyscira.
Yeah. Which pretty much the entire movie, except for the last minute or so, is that flashback. And even even in the present day, we don't hear her being called Wonder Woman.
Yeah, you actually don't have any dialogue during that part, pretty much at all.
You have her monologuing a bit.
Yeah, you have her monologuing over when they flash back into Themyscira.
Yeah.
But there's not any real dialogue. I think she thanks the guy who brings her the package, and I think that's about it.
I think she emails Bruce Wayne.
That's not dialogue, though. That's not spoken dialogue.
Yeah.
She reads the note from Bruce Wayne and then just immediately flashes back. So it goes from this dark, kind of not dimly lit, but just kind of like a boring office space into this beautiful landscape that is Themyscira.
Yeah, I don't know where this was filmed, but the area they got was absolutely perfect. It actually looks like a place you could call Paradise Island.
Yeah. Bright green grass, gorgeous cliffs, brilliant teal water.
Yeah.
And you see baby Diana Troy, or sorry,
Diana.
Diana
Someone's in a Teen Titans movie.
Baby Diana Prince, who is just Diana, Princess of Themyscira at this point.
Yep.
Maybe age 8.
Yeah.
Presumably. Watching all of the Amazonians training for battle.
If you look in the credits, one of them is credited as being Artemis of, I guess currently it would be Red Hood and the Outlaws fame in the comics. But she's been in some other Wonder Woman related stuff. She is a counterpart to Wonder Woman in a lot of ways, a darker counterpart.
So she's watching all of them train, and she runs to her mother, Hippolyta, and is like, hey, I want to train. And Hippolyta's like, no, you don't need to train. You're not even a real Amazon. And she says that she's not a real Amazon like the other Amazonians because Diana was made of clay by Hippolyta and brought to life by Zeus. And Diana then is put to bed by Hippolyta, who reads her the story of Ares and why she shouldn't be glorifying war and going into battle, which introduces the villain, Ares, god of war.
Yep.
As somebody who was trying to prove that Zeus's humans were bad, so he basically brought them war and let them kill at each other. To which Zeus created the Amazons, but to fight Ares and bring peace back to the men. But Ares kind of killed everyone, all of the gods and Zeus. And while Zeus was dying with his last acts, he created Themyscira, the island, for the Amazons. He enshrouded it with magic so that it couldn't be seen by men, so that it would be safe. And he created a weapon that was capable of destroying a god called the God Killer. And when Diana asks about this, her mom shows her a sword and shield called the God Killer, which is in this big, tall tower.
I think it was just the sword, and it was a very ornate sword with a lot of decoration.
And a big shield was next to it.
Yeah.
So the God Killer was probably just a sword, but they kind of came in a package deal. And obviously this super cool backstory only makes Diana want to go for it more. So when she finds Steve Trevor crashed into the island, and then the Germans who are after him invade Themyscira because they break the veil of magic.
Yeah.
They go into war between trying to kill all of the Germans, which they do, in an amazing battle scene.
Yeah. Everything about that battle scene.
It was
great.
The deaths were gruesome, but not graphic.
No, that there. I
They
think
were just shocking.
there was very little blood in the
Oh
movie, which
yeah,
was surprising.
I can't remember a single like really gory part.
Yeah,
All of the visuals that were death were just very haunting, more
yeah.
so. Um,
Even when Wonder Woman like slashes people up with the sword, you don't see blood splattered, which is
yeah.
interesting.
Um,
Yeah,
but
the
God, that fighting scene, it was amazing. The colors are still very bright, which was very interesting to me to see in a fight scene because I'm so used to, and it's actually one of my biggest criticisms of modern superhero movies is that they're so dark that you can't make out the details, and sometimes it just seems lazy because you don't have to have extreme detail because it's dark and you can't see it anyway.
yeah, and even the movies that are brighter, even then the scenes are so fast paced and
Hmm.
everything is so blurry that it's almost like they don't want you to see the details of the
Yeah,
fight scene. This was very detailed. This was very
it had
easy
use
to
of slow
follow.
mo. It had use of stills, which
Yeah.
was very weird. There were some very interesting shots. There were overhead shots. They were slightly shots taken slightly from below, and they were just head-on shots. And they were all working together to create this very dynamic, very beautiful, and brightly lit middle of the day fight scene.
Yeah. Honestly, I would have watched an entire movie about Themyscira going to war
Hmm.
because that just the first part of that movie was so, what's the word, enrapturing.
Hmm.
I was so invested in all of the main characters that had already been introduced, and all of the setting of Themyscira was almost a character in a lot of ways because of how important it was to every Amazon, and having that place get attacked by these Germans was a very interesting change from what we had seen previously of Themyscira.
Now, after that, basically they wrap Steve Trevor in the lasso of truth to try and get him to talk about who was attacking them. We find out that we're actually not in World War II. We find out that we're in the middle of World War One, the Great War, and that Steve Trevor is a spy, keeping his original backstory,
Yep, U.S. intelligence officer.
who was stationed in London. And Diana is like, well, then that must be Ares if they're all at war. This must be Ares. And Hippolyta's like, it's just a story. You can't go. And Diana's like, no, it's not a story. Obviously, this is real. And obviously, if none of you are going to go, I'm going to go and I'm going to kill Ares. Hippolyta says no. And Diana goes and steals the god killer and the shield, grabs Steve Trevor, and off they go. So as our characters dock into London, we meet Etta Candy, who is Trevor's secretary, and three allies of Steve Trevor who become our major characters. These are Samir, who is a secret agent and a skilled actor, Charlie, who is a Scottish marksman with alcoholic tendencies, who is revealed to have PTSD from a round of battle before, and the Chief, who is a Native American smuggler who trades on both sides of the battlefront.
With them in tow, Diana has them take her to the battlefront, the trenches, where no progress has been made, and the area between the two sides is called No Man's Land. Diana, after hearing about women and children and innocents being slaughtered, steps into No Man's Land and defends herself from the bullets and explosives that are hurled at her by the German army, and allows the forces on the British side to take over the German trenches. She there she then goes into a nearby city which is occupied by German soldiers and helps get rid of all the soldiers, in part due to Steve Trevor helping her perform a maneuver he watched an Amazonian do in the battle on Themyscira, which was pretty cool to see. He held the supporting role usually taken up by women in superhero movies, and he also was helping the main character simply by having paid attention to other strong women in the movie.
This was by far my favorite scene in the movie.
It was the kind of scene where my smile was already present when it started, and it got bigger and bigger, and my jaw dropped, and it dropped further at the just nonstop amazing action and amazing acting that was taking place.
And I love that they didn't just have Wonder Woman using the sword and shield. She was using her cuffs. She was using her lasso.
Which looked beautiful.
It was glowing, exactly the way you would imagine it from the comics. And, she used them all in a very dynamic way that was really different than I think any other movie that's come out recently.
I don't think I've ever seen someone fight like that in an action movie before. At dead stop. No one fights like that.
Honestly, I feel like the only character that could even rival, not even rival, just come close to Wonder Woman's diversity in skill and diversity of tactics would be Deadpool because he uses the swords, the guns, uh, shuriken, martial arts. He uses different weapons, but you know, Superman does have a lot of powers, but he more or less uses one or two of them in battle, and it's mostly flying and punching.
And heat vision.
Yeah.
But yeah, if there was a battle that had him use like all of his powers in tandem with each other, it could be probably the greatest fight scene of all time. But as it stands,
or if Batman actually used anything other than like grappling hooks and punching for a modern fight scene, he has all of this arsenal, this massive arsenal of bat weapons that he doesn't use. But they get Wonder Woman, who at this point she can't even fly.
Yeah.
She is entirely ground-based.
And she has essentially 5 weapons.
Yeah.
The bracelets, which she doesn't really use as an offensive weapon.
Yeah, it's entirely defensive at this point.
You have the sword, the shield, which is basically only used for shielding and bashing, and the lasso and her fists. And that's it. And there was so much diversity in tactics.
She never did the same thing twice, basically. Yeah. Even when she used her, her sword, sometimes she was swinging it around like a jumping spin or slashing or stabbing. She did different things every time. It wasn't just watching, her hit a dude with a sword over and over and over again.
And there was also a lot of her using the environment to her benefit, which is something you don't see a lot. Even with Batman, he basically, like you said, uses the environment to grapple. Yeah. And get away when he's in trouble. But he doesn't really swing around it or break pieces off to cause distractions or anything like that.
Which he does in comics. So it's not like it's a newfound thing. It's just something that they only chose to use for Wonder Woman. Yeah. They had her using her lasso of truth, which I believe in this one is called
the Lasso of Hestia.
Yeah. And we barely see Batman using his trademark batarangs anymore. He uses them to intimidate people.
Yeah.
He doesn't really use them in battle, though.
Yeah. And
he shoves them into a wall so that, when people come, they can be like, oh my god, it's Batman. But we have Wonder Woman using what a lot of people kind of think is almost a joke weapon to be immensely effective in battle.
It's almost like an extension of herself in a lot of ways. It seems like obviously it's magic, so it kind of is an extension of herself, but in a lot of ways it looked like it was moving to how she imagined it would move in her mind rather than how an actual lasso would work.
Definitely. It was just so awesome, and I hope that they learn from that, and in the future DC movies for Flash, Aquaman, Cyborg, and eventually the Green Lantern Corps movies, that they also take advantage of all of the other characters' massive amount of power
The two that I'm hoping for specifically, because Flash is very singular in how he fights. He jabs, moves away, jabs again.
But that's mostly an extent of what his powers can do.
Yeah.
You know,
But with a character like Aquaman, for example, you would think that his fighting would be very 360 low gravity based because he fights in water. He should be more acclimated to fighting when there is enemies that can be coming literally from any angle. And I think that the fighting style should show that.
Yeah.
Green Lantern can literally do anything with that ring. He's done things that I don't even know if the power can do that. He's frozen water with his ring. Who thought he could change the temperature with his ring? He can do anything with that thing.
He is widely considered to have the most powerful weapon. He just doesn't have the most intelligent user all of the time.
Yeah.
And that's where, the character gets complicated.
But I want to see, like, even if you're just going to do the cartoony things, like a giant pair of scissors or...
his trademark anvil.
Yeah. Or create a machine gun. Be creative with
what
powers,
he does.
Because
especially if it's going to be John Stewart's Lantern. And for Cyborg, I'm afraid that they're either going to go into he's basically just an extension of a computer route where he can, change files and tap into computer networks and stuff, or they're just going to have him be the walking tank with his arm, with his
I think they
arm. But I'm hoping that they have him be a more dynamic character.
Yeah,
like he is, especially in the New Teen Titans.
Yeah, I'm hoping they don't make him like War Machine from Iron Man, where he just has a bunch of guns attached to him that like just shoot in every direction. I hope he has like a very specific fighting style.
Yeah. Now, those were all definitely things that, made Wonder Woman such a strong movie and are one of the reasons that it's doing so well in the box office. But we also don't want to spoil the rest of the movie for you because we don't, want to ruin it for you if you're going to go see it.
If you want to see it again.
Or if you want to see it again. So we're not really going to talk about the ending or the villains. Right now we're just going to move into what we really enjoyed about the movie. In no particular order.
Yeah. Like we said, we did love the action scenes.
Yeah, they were well choreographed.
They were
well filmed. The cinematography was gorgeous.
Well thought out. There wasn't really any moments where it's like that you could cut that out. It seemed like everything was a sequence of events that needed to happen. Wonder Woman goes to this area, fights some people, several people gang up on her. She fights them all off, jumps out the window, which leads into this next battle. It was very well thought out, in my opinion.
And there was a really good balance of fighting scenes and dialogue scenes. Because sometimes I feel like when they have, like, movies that are very action-based, it's either overwhelmingly action scenes or long stretches of dialogue with nothing interesting happening between them. Yeah. And this was a really good blend of them, and sometimes dialogue happened kind of during fight scenes too, especially towards the end. I also really liked the humor. Yeah. It was a funny movie.
There was, if you're not a fan of sex jokes, you probably won't like the humor that much.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't like cis-normative sex jokes.
It was very cishet, but if you can't handle, cishet jokes to some capacity, there's probably not a ton of media out there that doesn't have any of it,
Yeah.
And even as a queer trans person, I still was laughing.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. There's a lot of jokes about human anatomy, about the act of reproduction.
Yeah, because especially during the part where, Diana first sees Steve Trevor and is like, "Oh, so are you like an average specimen for your race?
For
For
your
the human, for your species? Are you an average male specimen?" And he's just like, "Oh well, I'm above average. I'm above average. I'm a spy, so I've got to be like peak cream of the crop, you know." And they end up having to sleep next to each other on the boat, and it's just a really funny scene of kind of Diana making fun almost,
yeah,
probably unintentionally,
she
of Steve Trevor being, a 1930s, 1910,
40
19
19
when was World War One? 1920,
1910s.
1910s. A 1910s, boy,
Yeah,
American boy. He's like, "Oh well, yeah, I can't sleep with you, because I'm not like married to you." And she was like, "Well, I don't. What do you mean by why do people get married? What is that?" And she's like, "Why can't you just sleep with me? We're on a boat."
do do men not
Yeah,
sleep
do
with
men
women?
not sleep with women? He's like, "No, I totally sleep with women. I sleep with lots. I sleep with women." It was just so funny, and everyone in the theater was cracking up.
Yeah,
Yeah, there was a lot of that, but there was other humor as well.
yeah, a lot of
Especially with Etta Candy's
yeah,
character, um, who is only really seen in the beginning,
and the end.
and the very end. But the scenes she's in are very fun.
Yeah, she was very she was a very lighthearted character. She was surprisingly willing to throw down, which was fun. She had Wonder Woman's sword in her hand at one point, and she was totally willing to just pick it up and
Yeah, she
point
ends
it
up
straight at a
using.
German.
Yeah, she kind of in the movie she kind of felt like how I feel like everyone felt leaving Wonder Woman. Totally ready to kill 1,000 people.
The humor was really good. The action was really good. I loved the cast.
Yeah, the cast was very well chosen.
It was surprisingly diverse because I assumed because people
We've seen it time and time again on screen that you know we can justify having all of the women on Themyscira be white because they're Greek, as if nobody else on in Greece wasn't Aryan looking,
and,
because apparently they've also never seen what a Greek person looks like.
and conversely, oh, everyone's white because it's the 1910s, and there were no people of color back then. It was all white people.
Yeah. And contrary to that awful trope, we had a huge diversity on Themyscira.
Yeah,
We had body type diversity, we had some very thin but muscular women, but we also had some like very thick, almost looking like bodybuilders
yeah,
women, and we had women of all different types of races, um, as well as the same thing in London. Obviously the Germans were all white dudes because that's kind of how Germany did it. That's kind of why they were in the war. But in London, even in our cast, we had Samir and the Chief, who we do have problems with, but we're going to talk about that later.
yeah.
Um, you know, being there, being present, and having a significant role, even to the extent that in one scene, Wonder Woman's trying to get to know all these guys who she's going to be working with because she's uh, trying to be nice and friendly.
Yeah.
And she's talking to Samir, and he says, "Well, I didn't want to be here in the front. I wanted to be an actor, but I wasn't the right color."
Yeah.
Um,
You also have a scene where the chief talks about how his people were killed, and when Wonder Woman asks who killed them, he says, Steve's people killed my people. And that might have caused a little bit of mistrust in Diana of Steve,
mhm.
which is interesting. But it also was just a very real scene where
I was not expecting it at all.
yeah,
Because in a lot of ways, it did feel like a war movie.
yep,
It had, not like a
not like Saving Private Ryan.
yeah, more like Captain America.
Yeah.
It's a war movie first and a superhero movie second in some ways. Or, it was a war movie that you then dropped Wonder Woman into, and then you watched what happened. And you only showed what happened between when Wonder Woman got there. It was very interesting. I personally loved the costume and set design because that's kind of my thing. My background is in, art and sewing and costuming. So I loved the costumes. People keep calling Wonder Woman's costumes skimpy, and I just think that they're probably hypersexualizing her because her costume was not skimpy. You know,
It was
it
very
was it
functional.
was functional. Uh, there was no spandex involved. It looked like maybe leather, metal, and uh, leather and metal really.
Yeah.
Um, her there were no like obvious like boob and butt shots that they like to do to characters like Black Widow
Yep.
in the Avengers movies. She's not super skinny. She's very strong.
Yeah. She
Um,
apparently really bulked up for this
yeah,
role, Gal Gadot did, and it shows. She looked the part of an Amazonian who is been training a long time for this.
yeah, she looked very strong in her suit. Um, I liked how they made the props look. I liked the settings. I liked that in once they left Themyscira, everything around her was dark except for her,
Yep.
but not too dark. Not dark like most of the scenes in BVS. I only say that because that was one of my biggest beefs with BVS was how dark it was that I couldn't see anything. Even in a pitch black theater, it was too dark for me to make out details. Um, Wonder Woman was not like that. It was light enough to imagine. It almost looked like you were.
It almost looked like everything but her was muted.
Yeah, it was just slightly muted though, and she was extra vibrant. Um, I love the costumes of the women of Themyscira. None of them were skimpy. They did have a diversity of how the actual armor looked though. Some had sleeves, kind of. Some had skirts. Some had more like short, like cut
Yeah.
uh, wear. There were different kinds of skirts. There were long skirts, short skirts, skirts made of little tassel-y things. Um, and none of it was particularly sexualized in any way.
Yeah.
They did a good way of making, you know, them have functional wear, especially considering a lot of the Amazonians were actually people casted who have a background in fighting,
Yep.
Boxers, weightlifters, bodybuilders, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I also like that they didn't skirt around social issues.
Like we said, with Samir being a person of color who wasn't allowed to get an acting job, they also dealt with Charlie having PTSD.
In a very real way, several times actually. You see him drinking a lot. Um, you see him being very violent when attacked and kind of having a 360 personality change when he's scared. You see him, even though he is supposed like purportedly a great marksman, you see him freezing up and not being able to shoot to the point that Wonder Woman's like, wow, for your best guy, he can't shoot a gun.
Yeah.
To him having night terrors about war and having to leave, and when Wonder Woman tries to comfort him, getting very defensive about it. But then later on, as things get more, less scary,
More hopeful.
more hopeful because Wonder Woman's there and Wonder Woman is giving them this hope, you can see his symptoms not go away, but you can see lapses in him. He gets less scared.
Yeah.
He starts singing.
Which apparently he hasn't done in years.
And he gets a little bit embarrassed about it, and Wonder Woman says, no, keep singing.
It was a very, very...
I cried.
I wasn't expecting them to have that as an aspect of it, but it was very, very cute.
As somebody with a military family with PTSD, It was very real to me, and it made me really happy to see that interaction without just having his PTSD just go away. He still had it. It was still made like certain things in the movie maybe change or slow down a little bit at points, but you could see him gaining hope um, in a way that I have never seen really in a mass market movie.
Yeah.
Now, we do have a couple of criticisms that we're going to go over, such as Etta Candy's character.
Etta Candy's character was fine as a character. We both enjoyed her being on screen. The problem was that she wasn't given a lot to do.
Yeah, she could have been on screen a lot more. She was only really there maybe 15 minutes in total, like screen time.
She was supposed to be helming the mission from London, but we only really saw her doing that once, and it was just for a quick phone call.
And we don't actually know what she was doing either, because we never have Steve Trevor communicate with her.
Yeah.
We don't know what she's doing. We don't know what her role is. I mean, even what could have been improved was just like a scene at the end that kind of cemented what she actually did to help them. But we didn't really get that, and I would have loved to.
It's sad because in Rebirth specifically, Etta Candy was the person who was really helming the mission for Steve Trevor. She was a superior officer to him and was kind of awesome and kind of badass.
The next thing was that the chief was pretty problematic not because he was a Native American character, but because the movie kind of leaned into a lot of stereotypes. They had him doing smoke signals. He was wearing, what a lot of people think of like Native American wear. He had like leather stuff with like beads on it, which I don't know if that would be what actual Native American people in the 1910s would have worn if they were in England as smugglers. I'm not even in France. I'm not sure if that's accurate, so I'm not going to make like a huge glaring accusation on that, but I am going to kind of call out the smoke signals. They could have had Samir doing it or Charlie doing it.
Yeah.
All of them would have known how to do it, but they had the chief do it. They also called him the chief. I'm not sure if that's a thing from the comics. I don't know what that was about.
Yeah.
But, as much as I loved his character, they kind of did a little bit of a disservice there by leaning into stereotypes when in so many other ways in the movie they were leaning away from them.
I would agree with that, yeah. Also, there were a couple subplots that didn't really go anywhere. Like we said, Etta Candy leading the mission didn't really go anywhere. There was
one particular thing that Ben and I were talking about as soon as we got out of the theater, and we talked about it for like half an hour trying to figure out what happened with it.
Yeah, there's this, I guess
the weapons that the Germans are creating are gas because it's World War I. That's what they were doing, and one of the villains creates this blue gas. When you see the movie, if you know what happened with that blue gas, tell us in the comments. We beg you, because we cannot figure out what that was about.
Yeah, it
didn't go anywhere.
It made people stronger for a brief amount of time, it looked like.
And gave them kind of like godly powers, maybe telekinesis, maybe. I have no idea what it was. It was really misleading, maybe, but it didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, there was really no explanation for it.
There was no explanation to really how it got there or where it went. I don't know anything about this. The blue gas, the blue capsules. If you see the movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. Please leave your comments about the blue gas. Please. I'm dying to know what happened, and we looked it up, and we can't find anybody else talking about it, and we're just wondering if we missed something huge.
Yeah.
Like, is it something we blinked and we missed it? I don't know. But that was the most glaring subplot that didn't go anywhere.
Yeah. Zeus fathering Diana is revealed to be her real quote unquote origin story in this movie, which, as I said earlier, I have a problem with. I don't like having her powers come from being a child of the biggest player in history.
Yeah. Instead of having her powers all be, you know, from women, by women, for women, uh, she gets her. She's a demigod who gets the god part from a man and the less cool part from a woman, basically. Um, the other part that I had a little bit of an issue with, but not really, it wasn't that bad, was that I found the plot a little bit predictable. There's a couple of twist endings that they try and put in there that aren't really bad twist endings, just I knew what was going to happen from the first time that they hinted about what would happen. So maybe it was just me, but I felt like I could have gotten a little bit more of a, oh wow, moment from them.
I got a little bit more of that because I was more misled, I guess, by
The blue
the
gas.
blue gas giving people godly powers for a short amount of time. So I was misled by that. But yeah, in retrospect, it is
Pretty obvious.
kind of obvious.
Um, there was only really one thing by the end that I was like, oh, I didn't expect that to happen.
Oh, I expected that to happen.
You expected that?
I know what you're talking about, and yeah, I expected it to happen from before I went in the movie.
Oh, well, I mean, I knew it would happen eventually. I just didn't know how it would happen. Watch the movie, you'll know what we're talking about. um, but we also want to talk about, before we end, is, why is Wonder Woman?
Why is woman?
Why is Wonder Woman a feminist icon?
She's a really enduring character, and that's something that a lot of feminists have to do. They have to endure the life that they are leading and all the problems that go with being a woman. And yeah, she deals with intersectionality to an extent, which, depending on the writer, depending on the series, but a lot more modern ones, New 52 notwithstanding, she deals with a lot more intersectional social issues. She is a sign of peace, but is still willing to fight for what she believes in.
Yeah, she was willing to fight for peace, which is something that, you know, when you're facing people who are taking away the lives of people because of who they are, you have to do sometimes.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have quite the hang up on not taking lives that Batman does to the extent that it actually harms her.
Yeah.
But she is seen both in comic and in the movie as being immensely regretful and self-deprecating when she takes away the life of an innocent.
Yes. She does not regret when she takes away a life that would save a lot of other lives.
Yeah, she's sad that she had to do it, but she knows that she did have to do it.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting for a superhero in general, but especially for a woman superhero.
Yeah.
Because lady superheroes are generally considered to have to be very kind, motherly, and nurturing, which Wonder Woman is. But she's not just that.
Yeah.
She's not a fighting sex toy.
Yeah.
Like the movie version of Black Widow in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
She's not a sex object with a gun or with a sword. But she's also not like just a mom character. She is nurturing and badass.
Yeah.
She is strong but kind, and she is compassionate and to an extent, vengeful at times.
She is basically the embodiment of what people should hope to be. In a lot of ways, other characters are like that. I would say Superman is the biggest example of people trying to write a character to be that. But I think Wonder Woman is the most apt example, especially when you're talking about social issues.
Mm-hmm. Superman is very good for talking about
the goodness of
the goodness of mankind, to talk about social issues in regards to like xenophobia because he's an alien, but at the same time it's kind of a little bit of a stretch because he presents as a cis het white male.
Yeah.
So he can't really do that. It's not as effective as, say, the mutants and X-Men, which were created to literally be portraying this social message.
Yeah.
But Wonder Woman was created to be the social message. She was created to be a woman during a time where women were not allowed to be anything more than an object.
Yeah.
And both this movie and her comic history shows her as being a woman who loves women unconditionally.
Yeah.
But will also take down women who are hurting other women.
Yeah. She is a lover who is willing to fight for love, which is a character that I wouldn't say is uncommon, but is rarely done as well as Wonder Woman has
definitely. And so it discusses these gender roles, but it also discusses, it's you get to see these women in this strong power role. Not just Wonder Woman herself, but her mother, Hippolyta, the Amazonians, so many characters, really. Even Wonder Woman's rogues gallery includes tons of women.
Yeah.
Including
women who are doctors.
Yeah. We get lots of different women doing things that, in a way, like, we don't have, exception being maybe Batman. We don't have a lot of women in men's rogues gallery, because a lot of these rogues galleries were created in the Golden and Silver Age, where hitting a woman, quote unquote, was
not cool.
Bad. I mean, sure, hitting anyone is bad now, but specifically having a male character hit a woman wouldn't get through the CCA. But Wonder Woman does have these female rogues galleries, which is really cool and creates a lot of dynamics that we don't see very often. Now, in a future movie, a sequel, a Wonder Woman 2,
Gal Gadot has stated that she would be interested in having a female love interest. One thing that I'm hoping they do not do is having the love interest be Barbara and Minerva, who would then turn into Cheetah. Because that is something I can see Hollywood doing that I really don't want to happen. I just want Wonder Woman to be happy and be in a relationship.
Yeah. That would be great. It'd also be great, I think, just to have her kind of explore more relationships with women in general, because there were so few women in
the war
part of the movie. Just to have her showing where, like, we want her to pass the Bechdel test.
Yeah.
With humans.
Yeah.
With human women, not Amazonian human women.
Yeah. With women of man's world, which I think they did in this movie.
Yeah.
Just very briefly with Etta Candy.
Yeah. Now, that's all. I mean, we have so much to say, but I think that's all we can fit into our time frame. So.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Ryan, and thank you for listening to Queer Issues and Back Issues. You can find us online on our Instagram at Queer Issues and Back Issues, and on Twitter at Queer Issues Pod. All of our links are in the description, as well as the link to download our podcast. If you like our podcast, leave a like and subscribe to get a new podcast in your inbox every Sunday in June, and from then on, get one every other week. Thank you for listening.